You to join us, and many congratulations
Thank you very much indeed.
On what everyone acknowledges clearly has been a sweeping night of success for your party. Was it beyond your expectations?
Yes, undoubtedly. We were hoping to do well. I think we were quietly confident of doing well, but never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that we would win 56 out of Scotland's 59 MPs. The tectonic plates of Scottish politics shifted yesterday. It is a historic result. That's often an overused phrase, but it's probably not quite even meeting what happened yesterday. You know, there is an appetite for change in Scotland. There is very clearly a strong appetite for Scotland's voice to be heard much, much more loudly in Westminster than it has been heard before. And that's now the job of these 56 SNP MPs.
Some of your opponents, First Minister, are saying very clearly today that this is the best possible illustration of the assertion that if you vote SNP in Scotland, you get a Conservative government at Westminster.
Well, I mean, that's nonsense. The reason that the Conservatives are back in government is that Labour couldn't beat the Conservatives in England. If Labour had held on to all of its seats in Scotland, if they'd won all of the seats that the SNP won last night, the Conservatives would still be heading back to Downing Street. The failure here is of Labour to beat the Conservatives. The Shadow Chancellor, for goodness sake, has just lost his seat. Labour has barely increased their share of the vote and were unable to take the seats that they required to take to have a fighting chance of being in government. I was very clear during the campaign that if we had managed to get an anti-Tory majority, then the SNP would have worked with Ed Miliband and asked Ed Miliband to work with us to keep the Tories out. So Labour can't blame the SNP for their failure to be strong enough to beat the Conservatives.
If we are right in saying that the Conservatives are back with a majority, albeit a small majority, I'm wondering what kind of influence or power that you would have, even with as many MPs as 56, in that Parliament.
Well, we'll seek to have significant influence. We'll certainly make Scotland's voice heard. And I think if it is the case that the Conservatives are back with an overall majority, it's all the more important, in my view, that we've got a big, strong team of SNP MPs standing up for Scotland and fighting our corner. But the other point I would make is this: even a majority Conservative government cannot ignore what happened in Scotland yesterday. There has been an overwhelming vote for Scotland to have a louder voice in Westminster and an overwhelming vote against continued austerity. The issues that the SNP put at the very heart of this campaign were endorsed convincingly by people in Scotland yesterday, so these are now issues that we'll take to the very heart of the Westminster agenda.
When Boris Johnson spoke overnight of the importance of looking at some kind of federal settlement, is that something you'd find attractive?
Well, you know, we want to see the Smith Commission proposals strengthened, and we'll certainly argue that case. We've said in our manifesto, and it's no secret, that we want to see powers over business taxes, employment, welfare devolved to Scotland so that we can grow our economy and lift people out of poverty, grow the revenues of the country. But when I launched the SNP manifesto, 3 weeks or so ago now, I put ending austerity at the very top of our agenda. I said it was our #1 priority. People in Scotland voted for that yesterday, and we'll continue to seek to take that argument to the heart of Westminster.
In your manifesto for next year's parliamentary elections in Scotland, will you then, on the basis of this very strong performance, be talking about another referendum on independence?
I'm not going to talk about our 2016 manifesto the morning after the 2015 election. With the greatest of respect, I'll fight one election at a time. But I was very, very clear during the campaign and said directly and explicitly to voters across Scotland that this election was not about independence. It was not about winning a mandate for another referendum. I said to people that if they voted SNP, then I would not turn round the morning after the election and assume that their votes were a vote for independence. I'm not going to go back on that. This was a vote to make Scotland's voice heard loudly at Westminster. Scotland voted for that yesterday, and it's now the job of the SNP to represent those who voted for us and to represent those who didn't, to make Scotland's voice heard. And I think one of the many significant things about the result is that it wasn't just people who voted yes in the referendum last year who put their trust in the SNP yesterday. Significant numbers of people who voted no also did so. So we will seek to represent everybody in Scotland to the very best of our ability.
First Minister, Laura Kuenssberg here would like to ask a question as well.
First Minister, you said also consistently through the campaign you would offer another referendum if there was, to use your phrase, a significant change in the circumstances. Now, you've said yourself this morning the tectonic plates of Scottish politics have moved. That is surely a significant change.
Laura, I know you were listening carefully because we talked at length about this. I said the result of this election would not lead to another referendum. You know, I was very, very clear, and maybe it's unusual in politics, but I'm not the morning after the election going to go back in what I said during the election campaign.
No, but you didn't consistently rule it out. Would you rule it out now this morning, or accept that there has been a significant change? You can't argue there hasn't been one.
But I said the result of this election wasn't a significant change. The result of this election is not going to lead to another independence referendum. If there's ever going to be another referendum, people will have to vote for that in a Scottish Parliament election. And we'll publish our 2016 manifesto when the time comes for that, and people will have the opportunity to look at that and decide whether or not to vote for that when the time comes. This was a vote to make Scotland's voice heard, and that's what our 56 men and women elected to represent constituencies across this country are now going to seek to do.
First Minister, I think we're expecting to see you a little later on in London. Is that right, for the VE Day commemorations?
I'm coming down to London, of course, to represent the Scottish Government at the VE Day commemorations later on, yes.
We'll see you later on. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.